Good afternoon, everyone. You are welcome to this webinar on packaging and assembly for prototyping that's delivered by QB Technologies and hosted by CMC. My name is Karama and I'm a staff member, microelectronics team at CMC. I'll try to give you a brief intro to CMC Microsystems role. Then I will hand the presentation to Mr. Bill Lawrence from QB Technologies. We'll walk you through different topics of packaging and assembly. CMC Microsystems as most of you know, is a non-for-profit organization with the goal of lowering barriers to technology adoption. CMC manages also the CNDN, Canada's National Design Network, which is an entity that's recognized as one of the Canada 16th major science initiatives by Canada Foundation for Innovation, CFI. It's a network of around 67 universities and colleges and thousands of companies, and over 10,000 researchers and students who work in the areas of microelectronics, photonics, and mechanical sensors, basically MEMS, and recently quantum computing. CMC provides a service to simplify access and reduce cost to such advanced technologies. The main three key services provided by CMC are CAD, Fab, Lab. The CAD services delivers design tools and platform infrastructure to develop and design micro nano systems prototypes, in addition to training as well. It could be through cloud infrastructure or through client's desktop. The Fab services provides an access to a reduced cost MBW runs, multi-project waiver, also package and assembly, fabrication, and travel assistant to manufacture prototypes in either academic-based labs or commercial labs. I'm a part basically of this category. The lab provides an access to development platform and test equipment to validate the prototypes. Through CMC, you would have an access to advanced and well-known process design kits, BDKs, such as TSMC, Global Foundries, AMS, etc. Also, you would get fabrication services with a very reduced cost by aggregating different designs from different groups to be integrated on a single wafer. In addition to that, CMC delivers valued-added packaging and assembly services, backed by engineering support and consultation, providing the researchers with the physical components for testing and building prototypes. CMC also has a great deal of engagement with QB Technologies. The former name is QuickPack for almost a decade. So 2012 or 11. As an outcome of the services and technologies provided by CMC to a wide variety of researchers in the different application areas, components that have been created that can be used in advanced manufacturing and digital industries, also health and biosciences, and agriculture food. CMC also gives the clients an additional advantage by bringing to them its worldwide supply chain network and partners. Bill will take it from here, and after that, we'll go to the Q&A session. Bill, please go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, my name is Bill Lawrence. I'm representing QP Technologies, and the intent here is to go through a overview of what we do, and more importantly, what hopefully we can bring to the table to help in the packaging activities that you have. The agenda basically is the, if you will, the commercial, then into some of the details, and hopefully you'll find that useful, regardless of who might do your packaging. QP Technologies, we've been around for quite a while, since 1992. If you were able to net it all out, what I would say is we basically sell time and also, excuse me, flexibility from an engineering, packaging engineering perspective. Those are is a legacy, and I would call that our value statement. We're approximately 50 people. We have a facility in Southern California, basically near, in essence, San Diego. U.S. I thought I would go through first. I heard some discussion about, gee, what package do I use? I don't know how to approach things. Generally, what I would suggest is that as a starting spot generically, it's like two key things. A, how many I/O do you need to bond out? And B, is there any particular performance and physical requirements? From that, there's all sorts of types and variants on a theme. Our legacy is actually something called OCPP, which really is taking an existing singulated, used perhaps package and reconfiguring it, our polite way of saying opening it, for reuse, for new die, or a new device. That enables us to do things very quickly. It also enables us to do work with just about any package of any type. We also have what we call pre-molded air cavity, mainly QFNs at this point, that are molded as an air or an open cavity, that are, again, have the same functionality as far as being able to do things quickly, have also the leverage point of performance associated with air cavity and or devices that need to have interaction with the environment. Ceramic packages, I think, somewhat self-explanatory. That's the CMC lives and dies by ceramic packages. Almost all our assembly work we do for you all are the good old hefty ceramic. BGA substrates, this is kind of the evolution of the plastic package. It's as the name implies. I should mention also that we can reconfigure existing BGA substrates for reuse, which is becoming an emerging activity from a cost, time, and availability perspective. We do a number of custom configurations. These are all air cavity QFN options for a variety of different applications, some being power, some being solar, some being high performance RF. And then we also have if you will, the run-of-the-mill overmold line, which is pretty much the industry standard, making things to the ubiquitous JEDEC standards, as well as being equivalent to test sockets, so on and so forth, that you can buy off the shelf. For assembly services, which we'll get into a little more, and as we basically do a chip on board, chip on flex, whatever you care to call it. We'll talk a little further about each of these as we go through the conversation. We also do a reasonable amount of SIP work and MCMs. That's the emerging part of our business. Chiplets, I'm not sure. I think this is just basically another variation on a SIP type of application, where basically putting a dissimilar die or whatever together for various functionality. Flip chip, we do quite a bit of flip chip and stack die and SMT. So we pretty much provide the, if you will, the waterfront as far as assembly services go. And we also do wafer prep, wafer finishing, which is backgrinding and dicing, pick and place, die sort, and also tinning of individual die also is another thing that in an MPW type of world is sometimes often required. I mentioned that we do engineering and design. It's pretty much covers the waterfront. We'll do turnkey, interposer, BGA, fill in the blank type of things. We'll also do any subset thereof. It's kind of like we'll do whatever one asks or requires, and go from there. And regarding package options, it's a little more detail on what we just alluded to. Our OCPP plastic, as I mentioned, we can pretty much open any plastic package. The advantages are pretty much straightforward. Turn time, availability, as well as it allows all sorts of opportunity for testing, probing, and so on and so forth that one wouldn't have if it was in essence a molded package. We sell these as open cavity packages, and or we do the assembly. In fact, pretty much everything we do, you can either do a subset or all inclusive. One of the issues, or one of the thoughts I would mention about OCPP is there's not only do we have an open cavity package, you then can configure it in many different ways. Here's just some examples, 6 variations on a theme. And one of the concerns or issues historically has been that when you have the stitch line of having this package that basically has been reworked or opened, when you remold it or mold it again back to its original JEDEC criteria or standard, what is the performance like? And we've done some work with certain packages, and we find that they're actually equivalent to the overmolded part, if not better than. And one of the leverage points from a research point of view is we can use all sorts of different mold materials, so you're not stuck with the approximately 80% silica-filled standard overmold, called black plastic. There's all sorts of different modulus and other things that we can, variations on a theme that we can use. But I just include this here to point out that because of the binders that we use in the molder and encapsulant materials that we work with, they actually have equivalent to, if not better than, the standard molded plastic package. The pre-molded, or what we call OmPP, I kind of alluded to some of these things. Again, you can put all sorts of lids on these. There also is a number of different variants. We have some rectangular, we have a split paddle, so on and so forth. Most of these are custom. The standard products are basically 3x3 to 12x12 QFNs with varying lead counts. Almost in all of the what we call custom are really all open tools. So the options you see on the right-hand side of the picture here would also be potential options that you could consider or evaluate. Excuse me. Overmolded, the classic overmold, we have a number of DFN, QFN options. We also have legacy leaded package options, limited availability, but there is that capability also for those who are interested in doing things exactly the overmold way. From a custom substrate development service point of view, I mentioned that we'll do turnkey. Our major value in this is engineering capabilities, as well as time. If it for custom QFN, we typically we're doing them in approximately 6 weeks with lead frame availability and turn times these days. It's going to more like 12 weeks, 8 of which are our lead frame manufacturer turn time. as far as the, if you will, custom substrates, whether it be BGA, what have you, MCM or a SIP. We also do things comparatively fast that we will turn if you will, moderate complexity turnkey BGA in approximately 8 weeks. More complex could go out to about 12 weeks, and the most complex longer than that. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice as well as my connection here. So one of the questions that I think I heard, this kind of dovetails into the what package do I use. Here are some of the pieces of information that we would take or require or request, I should say, that would enable us to work through the details and design what the package options might be. Some people will ask, well, why don't you have all the list of packages or packaging options you might have available on our website? And frankly, because it's almost I won't say infinite, but a very, very large number of ways and directions we can go, because we do not have constraints from a manufacturing perspective. All of our manufacturing tooling is basically state of the art, but is really focused on having a flexibility to enable us to do many, many different things relatively quickly and with quality. The downside of that, of course. Yes?
Bill, sorry for interruption. You would like to take the questions during the presentation, or you prefer to wait until the end? There are some questions in the chat. Maybe you will come for these answers during the slides, but it's up to you, what you prefer.
You know, to be honest with you, I'm much more used to saying, okay, tell me what you need and we'll go from there. So why don't we look at the chat questions? Or
yeah, there is a question saying what the options for CMOS camera chips to be packaged. Basically, that's what you can deduce.
Yeah, CMOS camera chips, to be honest with you, one of the things that I would, ceramic for cases like that is always going to be a better option for low volume or prototyping. Otherwise, if there are certain costs that are associated with that, or also certain limitations as far as availability of given package options. I would suggest or propose that depending on the requirements, you can just pretty much use any of the packages that we've just touched upon. They're all open cavity or can be made open cavity. They all would then have the ability for sensor interaction. We've done some BGA, and we've done some ceramic, and I do not recall, I think we did a few QFPs some time ago. Generally, when you're talking about a CMOS camera application, you're very cost sensitive, so as such a custom plastic probably is your best bet. One of the variations that does also come to mind is that we have in the past done in some of our QFNs worked with very low CTE lead frames, which help for stability when that's a potential requirement that is somewhat secondary to a CMOS camera, but might be important in various applications. Other questions?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. There is another question. There is Saeed here asking, you presented different packages types at slide 9 or 10, and is there any preference for each application? For example, this package for that application and this package for this application. Can you categorize them based on the application? That's mainly
Yeah.
mainly it, correct?
Yeah, I would say yes, I think from a cost and from other points of view, from manufacturability, if volume manufacturing was ever a consideration, high volume manufacturing or cost, certainly QFN is your answer. If the problem that with the QFNs run into is basically die size as well as lead count. In essence, the 12 by 12 is about as big a device or big a package as you can get that will be able to effectively or reliably attach to a PCB board for a long-term reliability because of the DNP of the package. And when you get to higher lead count, really BGA is the direction to go. QFPs offer convenience for very small quantity runs, and a BGA pretty much drives customization by and large. We have a few what I call generic BGAs, but they're pretty much just redistribution of the pitch. When it comes to flip chip, the world gets even more confounded. Flip chip is pretty much all driven. Custom is by definition almost the only way to go. Now and then, to save cost or convenience, we could potentially do an interposer for a flip chip into a leaded or a wire bonded configuration to be compatible with a given test socket or cost requirement. Any other questions?
Thanks, Bob. I will update you during the presentation. Yeah.
Moving on to the package. We just discussed package requirements. Here's kind of the overview of the package design steps. If we were to really, this is more associated with doing a turnkey, if you will, custom substrate design. We need the critical net information, other physical or electrical performance requirements, then move from there to define footprints if such are required, so on and so forth. And each step in the process is basically iterative with the customer, whoever that might be. Then goes into even more detail as far as electrical performance requirements if such were critical. And from there, some modeling. Generally, we find that it's very rare that we're working on a design that requires modeling. Sometimes thermal, but not so often. And sometimes at least some electrical simulation, but not in detail. And the output then is basically released to the Gerbers, to the substrate manufacturer. We do not do internally substrate manufacture. We have a number of strategic partners that we work with for that. Some of the design rules, and this really translates back into cost as well as availability. We would draw the line as a 2 mil line in space as being, if you will, the first increment of design. If you're, excuse me, and 2 mil line in space and above, in general, that has been where we've focused a lot of our effort now and then. There is a huge financial cost delta between the 3 mil line and a 2 mil line and a 1.5 or less mil line. But these are some of the applications, or if you will, some generalized capabilities of what we can provide as far as our strategic substrate manufacturers as far as line and space and other details. Typically, with the thrust into tight pitch flip chip, meaning 150 micron and below, you really are stuck to pay the bucks and wait the time to go to the 30 micron or thereabout line and space. ABF or some other variation. Everybody's trying to get into that business now, but historically, we only had two North American vendors that we've worked with, that we had the capability to do the advanced capabilities. There's several that are emerging, and most of the time we actually had to rely on a partner in the Far East for that. So again, one last get off on QF and DFN design criteria. We have a number of different thicknesses that can be, as far as the overall thickness, a number of different approaches to die attach, so on and so forth. Again, keeping in step with our idea of, or our focus on allowing engineering and flexibility, as well as doing things in a timely manner. Now, I thought I would go through some of the specific details to give you some more specifics as far as capabilities and limitations go. I'd say they're somewhat industry standard as such, but for die attach, we have a variety of different materials. The accuracies of the various machines we have, as far as placement, 5 micron, we actually probably do a little better than 5 micron with our fine tech, and on through the other details associated with that. One of the questions that came up so I put this slide in, was the question related to die clearance and cavity package. I should mention that these for us are all what I would call guidelines. It's not ironclad. We often violate some of these criteria, but it gives you, as you get toward the edge of these criteria or guidelines and or below, there are certain yield or other challenges that you're going to find. I think one of the questions that I know I'm most asked is, what is the, if you will, minimum distance for a down bond from a die? Here you'll see that using basically 750 microns, that's pretty, it's pretty, if you will, generous. In essence, we generally can go down to 350 micron as far as that goes. But again, some other details regarding the die placement and the die flag, or basically the size of the pad that we're putting the die on. Now, it's not uncommon that we don't sometimes even put die larger than the die attached pad area for certain cases. Or in the case of our OCPP product, that we actually make the die attached pad area larger than the original package. Die attached materials, we have a number of different conductive, non-conductive, and thermally highly thermally conductive materials. These are basically the epoxies. We have your solder, gold, tin, and other attach options also available. For ball bonding, standard gold wire ball bonding, we have capability of working with a 30 micron pad opening. Tools we have are approximately 40 micron pitch. As I mentioned, they're pretty much state of the art. This is kind of I put these in more as a reference for you as you try to lay out things, whether for the bonding. This is, if you will, more complex wire bonding. Again, giving you some guidelines. One of the questions that I know has been in recent time and happens in chip on board often is wire lengths. Wire lengths pretty much our tools, as most tools, they have a physical limitation as far as spool out of wire of about, I say 6.5 millimeters. We can probably stretch it to 6.8 or maybe even 7 in worst cases. Occasionally, we often will use jumper wires for extra long wires as required as a way of mitigating this constraint. Wire diameters versus die bond pad sizes, which I think is always something that we often will find that people will request wire diameters that are too big for the pad on their die, and so we have to modify that. Aluminum wedge bonding, very similar as far as dimensional requirements. We also have heavy wire and ribbon bonding, just as an FYI. Chip on board, this was kind of I'm going to segue from here into some further details. Now, one of the other issues that we often run into is SMT placement in regards to the die. It really needs to have enough space so that whether we encapsulate or in some other way protect those wires, that there is enough space between the wire and the component. We do have certain limitations. These limitations are actually based on our gold wire ball bonders. We also have aluminum capability that has a significantly bigger, almost a 2x size capability. I call it COB Ancillaries for lack of a better term. Here's what we know as far as bond pad metallization goes, which is historically been the biggest issue. Most board shops are set up to do connector gold plating, but not to do a wire bondable gold plating. And so this, I would dare say, today we're probably still looking at almost 20% of the boards that we get are just not wire bondable gold or aluminum. The finish is just incorrect. And so it's pretty imperative that even though it's going to cost more and it may cost you time, that you ensure that it has a wire bondable metallurgy. Any questions? We've found that we can look at the data or the specifications and or the XRFs often, but the reality is we find that the functional testing is by far the best way to really determine things. In regards to nearest neighbor, I just put in these dam and fill guidelines so you have some idea of what dimensions as far as your nearest component needs to be. We do a frame and fill option also, which is able to reduce that the clearance by about 50%. It's additional cost and time, but for some that's becomes important. Flip chip. This is the, if you will, solder it attached. For the lucky people who have their die already bumped and suitable for a flip chip attach. Here's some of the general details and what we have is available. We also do a gold stud bump. There is, especially in the research world, a desire to move forward with taking what was a die designed to be wire bondable and making it flip chip by gold stud bumping. This is what our criteria is for that. And moving from there, we have two options as far as gold to gold, Thermo-Compression and Thermo-Sonic bonding. There are limitations. Thermo-Compression is certainly the most cost-effective and the easiest. The issue here is that the temperature required is in excess of 300 C, so as such, materials become, the substrate becomes quite critical. Thermo-Sonic is a lower temperature, more forgiving in the temperature, but it also requires special collets and handling. Our experience has been that we say 30 bumps. I would say we'd probably be willing to give it a go at 80, but above that we have not found, even though we've worked quite a bit on it, to get what we consider to be a satisfactory or 100% yield with Thermo-Sonic. As far as wafer backgrinding goes, some of the details of what our capabilities are. Dicing guidelines, and I mentioned the individual die thinning. We do this, and I should also mention that we thin bumped and non-bumped. And that concludes it.